Hey everyone, welcome to a special Workspace Recap edition. We are having a guest on the show today to talk all about HP, Google, made for Chrome, made for Meet, made for Voice, products, certifications, how all that works. We met at Google Next, and I was just blown away by the products that I had seen at the booth on the show floor, and immediately invited Mike to come on the show. So our guest is Mike Carr, Global Solutions Architect. That comma keeps catching me. Global Solutions Architect, Google. So everything Google category at HP Poly. Is that right?
Absolutely. So we can just say I'm the Global Solutions Architect for Google at HP Poly, and I look after all of our solutions that fall into the Unified Communications category at HP.
Perfect. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned there in the brief intro, you've got a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of amazing products out there that HP and Poly has worked on. I was personally very happy to see HP scoop up Poly. I do think that it's a really good pairing, and I've been loving the Chromebooks that I've seen come out of HP, and I think the entire ecosystem that's being built out is just really powerful. And I'm excited to talk about some of the things that we have going on through here. But just to kind of kick us off, for those who aren't familiar with it, could you briefly explain the Meet Certified, ChromeOS Certified, Voice Certified? What are all those programs? Why are they different programs, and how do they all work together?
Sure. So Google has a series of certification programs that they use to basically guarantee a certain quality of service across different places where hardware meets their software in Workspace and in Chromebooks. So when we look at something like the Works with Meet, there's actually two different Works with Meet certifications. One is a Meet Room Peripheral certification. So those are devices that plug into a Meet Room kit. Those are USB video bars, cameras, microphones, speakers, things like that. And then there's the Certified for Meet program, which would be all the peripherals that you use, like we're using right now. So if we're using if we're going to participate in a Meet call on Windows, PC, whatever, Google certifies devices for that too. So we have headsets and cameras, microphones that are all certified for use in that program. And that's basically just Google's way of saying, yeah, these devices are guaranteed to work. If you buy this and you're a Google Workspace user, you're going to be happy. And then we have the Works with Chromebook program, which is very much exactly as it sounds. Google has pretty strenuously tests and certifies devices for use with Chromebook. So that means it's a guarantee that any device that's certified will work with any current Chromebook that's still within its support window. And it's, as simple as that, but it ends up being pretty complicated because there's a lot of models out there. And every chipset gets tested. Everything gets tested against every device. So pretty interesting program. And we have a ton of devices that are certified there. And then there's the Works with Voice program, which is pretty similar to the Works with Meet. There's a bunch of devices that are certified for use when you're using voice, through your browser or on your phone, your mobile phone, something like that. Poly is super unique, though, because we also are the sole provider of handsets for Google Voice. So when you're using the Google Workspace, you're using, an enterprise version of that. You can also attach a handset. So an old-fashioned phone sits on your desk. You can actually pick it up and make calls in Google Voice. And we also build ATAs, which are analog telephone adapters. Those are pretty cool because you can bring your old analog phones and use them in Google Voice. But people also use them for a ton of other uses, like gates, for example, when you're at a garage and you need to run an intercom and open up the doors so you can come in. There's a ton of side use cases that a lot of people don't think about, but we build for those too.
Yep, I've certainly done that with the gate phones. The problem I have with those is people keep crashing into the gate, and then the line gets disconnected, and then got to have somebody go out and rebuild it. It's very frustrating. I want to be able to use it for elevator phones, but I understand there's some regulatory problems with that. But that's another area that would certainly be helpful. And if you could make one that was plugged into local power and had a cellular chip into it, then I'd be even happier for those gates, because then I don't have to worry about running cables and setting all that up.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of providers that I've seen that do products like that, cellular connected for gates. It's a weird niche area of IT when you get into the infrastructure side of technology and wiring, and yet you still need voice communications over there, so or even video communications in some of the newer installations.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. We haven't done much in the way of cellular communication, right? HP has it integrated into some of their laptops. We don't have it in our devices. I think the closest that we get is some of our decked handsets that can get through pretty long distances, pretty high density. But I think that there still might be some challenges in the use case that you're describing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, DECT is pretty solid, but not quite cellular, not quite a separate connection. So you mentioned for as long as Chrome is supported, they certify the Chrome devices will work as long as Chrome OS is supported. Is that the auto update policy that now has been extended for 10 years?
Yeah, that's correct. So basically, Google builds all of the images for all of their systems that on Chromebooks, and so they're guaranteeing that the drivers that you use for your devices are going to be part of that part of Chrome OS. Now, I haven't seen a case where a device drops out of the Works with the Chromebook program, so I don't know what that looks like on the other side. I don't really anticipate a device ever stops working, but there's only so much you can guarantee, right, in terms of
Right.
backwards compatibility. And so that's pretty much where the line is.
That's really pretty incredible. It's not just the device itself that's going to be good for 10 years, but also any of the peripherals that you buy that are certified to work with it will also work for 10 years. I didn't realize it had that kind of extended element there of the program.
Well, I think that it's an element of trust, right? That's one of the reasons why Google does it, is that they want users to buy a piece of hardware and know that it's going to work, especially in an enterprise environment, that you know that headset that you buy, you'll have that for years. And so they want to make sure that the software meets the hardware and that you get your investment, delivered back to you.
For sure. Okay, awesome. So the auto update policy, folks, has more than just the Chrome device itself certified, but apparently the partners have to stay certified with it as well. All right, so that's just a little bit on these three programs here and the difference between them. I would love to see more of like I don't know. I think Apple has it really rock solid in terms of like when they certify something that works with Apple devices, you just know it works across the board, and the branding is really strong. I think Google has some areas here where they're still trying to figure out the branding. Chromebooks Plus, what does that mean? Those specs I've talked about in the past on the show are a little bit lame compared to what I would expect from a plus level Chromebook, like the Chromebooks that I have from HP, which are right next to me over here, is the Dragonfly Pro and the Elite series, and those have been fantastic devices. That's what I would imagine would be under the Plus branding, is something that has a real solid processor in it, a solid amount of RAM at minimum of 16, and maybe an i5, something along those lines. The i3, I can see it working, but the Plus program, especially with a 10-year update policy, I would expect it to be a little bit beefier. But that being said, I do really appreciate all the effort that HP has put in terms of making those devices really rock solid. Is there anything you can tell us? Kind of, I don't know if you can talk about what's coming or what goes into developing those. Obviously, you have a very close relationship with Google. Is HP the premier manufacturer of these devices now that Google has completely basically exited the game?
You know, Google's exited the game because for them, it's kind of a loss leader to build hardware. Hardware is hard,
Hmm.
and it takes years to get just a single model out of the door. And we look at things like the Plus program as it's basically curation and saying that there's this level of experiences that um, we expect you to see when you have something that has this label. So it's more along the lines of what is it that just general consumers want? What is it that enterprises want when they are buying a fleet of devices? Um, how do we curate an experience that says, yeah, when you use this in these circumstances with all these applications that you use every day, you're going to have an experience that is above maybe what you would expect to get from a Chromebook in a grade school. It might just be, it's just these different levels. And so from an HP perspective, we meet that. And we look at those different levels, and we know that there's different types of users, there's different personas, there's different kinds of users across the spectrum, and this is just a place to help people understand what part of the spectrum is right for them.
Awesome. No, it's a very interesting position that HP is in here because to me Google had really a massive hit with the wow, I'm blanking on the name now, not the Pixel, the it's the name of the Chromebooks. Pixelbook,
They
the
have
Pixelbook
other.
Go, and the Pixelbook and the
Yeah,
Pixelbook Go are the two ones that I was referring to there. And essentially, the Pixelbook originally was a gorgeous piece of equipment and really rock solid. And as I understand it, they're still using it at some places inside of Google. And then they came out with the Pixelbook Go, which was for me, the wider laptop, so a better ratio for my work style and more knowledge
right.
worker style as opposed to developers that like the taller screen there. And I was really disappointed to see when they discontinued working on those. And I was very happy to see HP coming out with these other devices at a similar price
Absolutely.
point. And it's like with Google Pixel, they generally try to push the envelope of what's possible, and it seems like they kind of just handed that mantle over to HP now.
Oh, definitely, it's inspiration, right? They want to inspire the users, but they also want to inspire manufacturers to look at what's possible. How do we push the edge of what hardware does, and then let manufacturers that are really the experts pick it up and run.
Hmm.
And I think it's worked perfectly.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that not to sound like a marketing spiel for you guys, this is not a sponsored episode, but the build quality is such a different level when it comes to the elite series and the Pro series of Chromebooks here compared to some of the other manufacturers, which are using more plasticky, flimsy, bendy kind of devices and materials. And when I pick those up, it's like, oh well, this feels good. But when I pick up the HP ones, it's like, wow, this feels like a Mac.
Yeah, I don't leave home without. I have the Dragonfly, the Elite Dragonfly, also absolutely my go-to device. And it's just there's confidence, right? You pick it up, and you don't really think about it. You just feel confident in the device that you're using. Obviously, that's the goal for a flagship device like that. And so, yeah, I love it. I don't leave the house without it.
Fantastic. All right, so we talked about Chrome OS quite a bit here, and some of the devices. Let's get into some more of the peripheral. What's possible with Meet certified devices? Are these meeting room space devices, or I know that each. Do you guys have anything that's a part of the Series One, or is that all through? Was that Acer?
Those are all Avacor.
Avocor.
Um,
That's right.
And Avacor is a partner of HP's also. It's
Oh,
kind of a
okay.
separate line of devices. They make fantastic touch displays that we
Hmm.
use across all different ecosystems at HP. But we make a couple of different families of devices in the Meet world. Most recently, we released our Studio X series devices on that are Android based video bars. These have been extremely popular in the Zoom and Teams world, and also extremely popular in our own PolyOS, just kind of standard SIP call platform. But now this is available for the first time. It's the only product on the market today um, that is an Android-based video bar, runs Google Meet natively. I've got one running right behind me right now. It's our brand new Studio X52. You can't see it because it's too high up, but I've got the control panel sitting on my desk. And this is a daily driver conference room style device. We have some other devices that are certified too. We have our Studio X30. That's a huddle space device. It's definitely a place where Google told us that they need a little help expanding their portfolio and getting to some of the smaller rooms and just smaller areas in general. And then we also have a large room device. It's called the Studio X70. It's got two cameras built in, does automatic switching between the two lenses. So it finds people in a room and knows if somebody's far away or if somebody's off to the side, and it can give everybody their own frame. And that framing technology is available on all of our devices, but specifically on the X70, we have two cameras built in to go through things like that. So the Android area is really interesting to us because it's by far and away the easiest way to install a Google Meet room. There's I mentioned before, there's nothing else like it on the market, but realistically, you've got a touch control panel that plugs in with a PoE cable. You've got your Studio X series bar, sits on top of the TV or gets mounted to the wall. You need Ethernet, you need power, HDMI. That's it. That's the installation. So there's no long cable runs. There's nothing, no USB devices that you need to figure out how to extend or hide under the floor. The very easiest installation there is.
Yeah, I was going to ask what are some of the benefits of having an Android-based device as opposed to some of the other firmwares that are out there?
So installation is one of them. We're running our own operating system then at that point. So the Android version we use is Poly's. We develop and maintain it, and we guarantee it for years and years to come. And Google maintains the application. So there's a couple of interesting places where this is interesting. One is, let's say you were traditionally a PolyOS user. Maybe you used a SIP platform, and you already had a Studio X device. It's just an application. You go into your provider mode and change it to Google. So you have a swath of users that already own Studio X devices that can become Google Meet users and have Google Meet rooms set up with basically the click of a button. And then that, along with that, is the freedom to say, maybe there are times when I want to use other platforms. You can switch, and so that's part of what this does. This is purpose-built communications hardware, but it isn't tied to a specific ecosystem. It's kind of more about having the freedom to choose your ecosystem, and then roll with that.
And how does that work in terms of managed through the Google Workspace admin dashboard? Does it just come up as a regular Meet device?
It looks very similar to a regular Meet device. There's some features within the admin console that are not available in Android because they're Chrome features. And so there are some minor differences there. We do have a separate device management platform called PolyLens that lets you get into some of the deeper administrative tasks, hardware policy setting, things like that. However, all these devices appear as native devices in the Google Admin Console. So it's not like you're managing devices separately from your fleet. Realistically, there's just a few features like things like framing modes and audio modes that are managed separately. We do expect all of those to fold into the Admin Console over time. That's definitely a goal of Google's, is to bring parity between all the platforms.
Yeah, it does definitely seem that way. There's been a lot of announcements in the last year or so surrounding interop with Zoom and WebEx and some of the others. I was on a GoTo meeting this morning. Oh, God, that platform does not work well on Mac. It disconnected several times. I switched headphones and I unplugged a monitor and it freaked out. I had to close the app and reopen it. So I don't know why people are still using some of those older platforms. Obviously, we're big fans of Google Meet over here. And anybody who is a Workspace user generally tends to be on Meet, and dare I say it, sometimes even on Zoom, which has its benefits at times. I will admit that.
We see that there's a ton of legacy platforms out there. GoTo, BlueJeans, of course, has been retired, and we see a lot of those users come over to Google Meet. And so BlueJeans was another application that you could run on Studio X. And now, like I said, a click of a button and you're running Google Meet and you're in Workspace. So I think that's kind of an ideal scenario for a lot of people.
Yeah, it definitely is a great way to invest in something and know that whatever you're going to move to in the future, likely you already have the gear that'll work with it. So I definitely appreciate that kind of long-term thinking and future-proofing. Now, that click of a button that you mentioned, is that done through PolyLens, or where does that happen?
So that can happen in PolyLens. It can happen. Our devices have their own internal web control, so you can log in directly to a device and choose from there as well. So it just depends on how a fleet is managed. If you're a smaller shop that just has a couple of devices, you can certainly use PolyLens. Makes life a lot easier, but you can do it just going to the IP address of the Studio X device and choose whatever provider mode you want to choose.
And is PolyLens designed as sort of like an add-on to manage just that peripheral, or is it a greater IT management app?
So PolyLens looks at every piece of Poly hardware that's out there. So that can be um, headsets, it can be cameras, video bars, whole slew of devices, phones. All of these can be managed directly in PolyLens, and we look at things in terms of what is your, uh, you know, poly footprint look like. I expect that we'll see some things start to change and grow as we integrate more with HP. But for today, PolyLens is just that. It's your way of looking at all of your poly devices that are out in the field.
So you are able to register them to your account and manage them from a single dashboard.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so similar to what you would do on the Meet management dashboard in the admin console,
Yes, definitely.
but
And
with more features.
yeah, one of the things that we like to do is look at how we integrate more and more of those features into Workspace, because obviously the goal is, we would like to see just one place to manage everything.
Yeah.
And the way that would happen, right, would be with APIs that go talk back to Lens and between the admin console and Lens. That would be ideal. But I think we have some time to go before we're completely there. But I think that's the nirvana from a management perspective.
And one of the things that I wanted to highlight before we move away from the conference room devices is we talked about some of the technology and the AI that's going into the speaker sets for these devices. One particular client of mine has a conference room from hell from a AV perspective. It is soaring ceilings, glass walls on all four sides, and a 16-foot long glass covered tabletop. Well, the tabletop itself is glass, and that thing echoes like nobody's business. And I've tried several kits out there. Admittedly, I haven't tried the poly kits out there or any of the new stuff that you have, but I haven't been able to solve for any of that echo. I will say that the Google Meet, what do you call it, sound noise canceling capabilities have significantly improved to the point where that room is at least usable on a Google Meet. It's certainly not on a Zoom call, but I was wondering if you could talk about a little bit about what you guys have done in that area so that a lot of that processing is happening on device, and how you can address a terrible instance such as that.
So, it's funny because the room sounds beautiful. Like, I
It
bet
does.
from a user perspective, it's absolutely
In
amazing
person, yes.
to sit there in person. And then there's the reality that a lot of these beautiful spaces are nightmares from an AV management perspective. Um, and so it's kind of like, it's really hard to have it all. And so we're hoping to help with that. And we've got a couple of new features that are complementary, that work across all of our Studio X devices. The first that fits kind of the glass room design is what we're calling uh, it's a Director AI perimeter. And what that does is it lets you set a perimeter, particularly within group and people framing modes, that says, I know the size of my space that I'm in. I know that my walls might be glass. Maybe I'm in, a scrum area. I don't want to see people or focus on people that are not within the range of whatever the parameters I've set. So that might be, a 10 feet wide and 16-foot deep room. So we can explicitly say, don't show me faces that are outside of 10 feet wide and 16 feet and maybe not within 2 feet of the camera or something like that. Like, I don't want to see those. If you're too close, you're too close, and that'll be weird. So we take that and we say, but this is designed for classrooms. This is a problem that has existed now for years, where that guy walking down the hall, if he goes slow enough, or maybe he's just standing there having a chat with somebody else, but right there, now they're in your call, and the people in your call are like, who's that? And you're like, I have no idea who that is. Sorry about that. So we enable this feature called Directory AI Perimeter, and it's just a checkbox. And then from there, you can set your overall parameters. It's set on the device itself. Yes, you can set it either through PolyLens or just through the IP web interface. But that takes care of like what you're seeing. Um, but then the next issue that you mentioned is that there can be some pretty intense reverberation. And so what we've done is we've added something that falls into our other family of audio called Noise Block AI. This is our technology that just says, things like, I don't want to hear you rustling your bag of chips. I don't want to hear somebody typing at the table or making non-human noises, basically. But reverberation is a challenge because it's kind of a human noise. So what we've done is another selection from our administrative console that just says, I want to remove reverberation. Um, and it's as simple as that. You just say, so now I want to enable noise block AI reverberation removal. And it does that. It completely takes out reverberation in a room. So a room you've just described, which is, beautiful room to look at, nightmare to set up. We can make it a beautiful room to look at and use using both of these technologies. And these are new from us, but we're incredibly excited about them. And they're really interesting too, because some of these things are kind of hard to demonstrate, right? Especially reverberation. You need to be in the space. So when you get back in the room and test it with a poly device, I think it'd be really cool. Do a little recording, toggle it on and off, and you can see just how powerful that feature is.
There you go. We'll have to do our next episode recording from that conference room on my client site. And yeah, that room is to your point about people walking by. We like to call it the fishbowl because that's literally basically what happens. The edge of one of the walls is overlooking the kind of the bullpen, bunch of cubicles down, and they're always like, "Oh, what's going on up there? Look at all those people!" And then people walking by outside. There's a hallway that is open air that also looks out over that cubicle area. So the people come upstairs. They do a drive by, as we like to say, and yeah, it's been a nightmare, certainly on calls and with some of the other tools that we've used. So definitely looking forward to trying that out.
Awesome.
All right, let's go from the large conference rooms down to the smaller spaces, the desks. Let's talk about headsets and docks and desk phones. Obviously, those are kind of different areas here, but it's all about the unified experience of making everything work together. I'm personally a bit of a headset junkie. I mean, super nerd. I've got these are Jabra. I forget what they're called. The 80 M80 D80, whatever the hell they're called. Noise canceling ones. They're massive. I actually don't like these very much because they're very heavy and they're extremely large. I mean, just you can kind of see them. I'm wearing my Sony QC45s on my head right now for recording. I've got my Apple AirPods over here. I've got devices coming out of my ears. My wife is using actually one of the Polycom ones. I forget the actual name of it at the moment, but she swears by it and refuses to use anything else out there. So, what are some of the office solutions? And we can get into the smaller AirPods area as well, but let's start with some of the larger ones with the mics that come down. What are some of the breakthroughs that you've done there and some of the products that you offer?
Sure. So I have a strong suspicion that the device that your wife uses is probably our Focus UC Voyager Focus UC2, which is an over-ear headset, and I'm surrounded by headsets all the way. By the way, I have them. Every device that we certify for Works with Chromebook or Works with Meet, I've got one. I do testing with all these devices constantly, and we have many headsets that are currently in flight in the certification process that I mentioned before. So the majority of our USB-based headsets are certified now. So we have some different families of headsets. That's our Blackwire series, which is what I'd consider to be our normal communications device. If you are a flexible office worker, maybe you're home sometimes, maybe you're in the office, it's pretty much what you would give to just normal employees. And then there's a family of these different sizes, different features. It might be noise control, noise cancellation, for example, on some of the models. All of them have our acoustic fence technology built in, which says that if you're not, within this area of the boom, you won't hear it. You just won't. Like that sound does not come through. And we have tons of different demos that we do of people, running a blender while on a call, things like that. You can find a zillion YouTube videos describing this scenario. And so that's for a normal worker. Then we have a family called Encore Pro. It's another USB based family of devices, and there are all kinds of different form factors, but they're intended for people that are on calls all the time. Incredibly durable devices, and they're intended for like contact center, call center kind of scenarios. Doesn't matter where you are, and usually they're intended that you are the one you take it home. It's in your bag, it's getting bumped around, but the next day you come back, plug it in, and you're back in business. So those are USB models, and most of those models are certified with the Works with Chromebook program, and if they're not, that means that they're on the way and they're being tested right now as we speak.
Nice.
And then we have our wireless DECT headsets. So I like DECT stuff, and one of the cool things about it too is that these devices are certified for Meet and also the Works with Chromebook program. And what the DECT devices do, they basically say it's wireless, right? So you've got a wireless headset. It's not Bluetooth, so it can survive in high density areas. So one of the limitations of Bluetooth is, let's say you work in an office and there's 100 people on your floor. Bluetooth has trouble with that, and it has trouble navigating large amounts of people. You start to hear crosstalk, static, breakouts. DECT is a secure wireless technology. Those issues go away. And so it lets you do things like have, call center managers or people going fairly long distances from their desk. So they might be on a call, but they're going to go stand over somebody's shoulder that's, yards away. Not a problem for a DECT headset. These are things that are certified with Meet and Works with Chromebook. And then most of these devices are certified with Meet today, but it's our Voyager line of Bluetooth devices. And so we have a whole slew of pretty well-known Bluetooth headsets in the Voyager family, like the single ear 5200 is a classic. I think everybody's got one or has had one at some point in time. To our latest Voyager Free 60 set of headsets, which are small in-ear short boom style headsets. And then I mentioned before, we've got our Focus UC series. So the Voyager Focus 2 is probably one of the most popular Bluetooth headsets on the market, and certainly our most popular, which is just high quality audio, high quality listening, exceptional quality from a transmit standpoint, resist things like wind and other noises and other people talking around you. It's really the clearest headset that we make.
Yeah, so my wife
So
actually has the previous generation, the Voyager Focus UC, the original
I
one.
was close.
So we're gonna have to get her an upgrade there to
That's
the
right.
new the Voyager 2.
That's right.
We'll see what the differences are between those. I was curious. You talked about the benefits of DECT and the distance and the non-interference and things like that. But then your most popular headset, the Voyager 2, is Bluetooth. Why choose Bluetooth over DECT? Why not have them both? Why not have it as a DECT headset? How does that decision work?
Well, one of the places I'm going to say right now, it depends. And
Okay,
it depends on your environment. So I mentioned before that DECT is really good for high density areas. And it also depends on your platform. So something that's interesting right now is there are no Bluetooth headsets certified for Works with Chromebook today. It's something that's,
really?
I believe, incredibly close. But it is a current something that Google is working very hard on to provide, I think, the infrastructure to support Bluetooth headsets from a wide variety of use cases, either through a dongle or connected directly via Bluetooth to one of their devices. And Google's kind of held off on certification until I think they feel like they have an experience that matches every other device that connects to it. And
Hmm.
so I think that Google's very close to being able to say yes to certification. The experience with our Bluetooth headsets on Works with Chromebooks on Chromebooks overall is fantastic, but fantastic isn't quite good enough, I think, from a certification perspective. And so one of the things that they're working on, it goes along with things like fast pair and other technologies, is you expect your headset to work exactly the same way 100% of the time. And that when you walk up to it and it pairs, it's the same experience. When you do volume control, it's exactly the same experience. Call control, same thing. They do not want to see any differentiation between a Bluetooth headset and a USB headset. And that kind of thing takes time. Even, other platforms, they still respond a little bit differently between a USB and a Bluetooth headset. And I think Google's goal overall is to make it so that these experiences are seamless, and they guaranteed it. And so we're pretty excited about that.
Right. I recently was playing around with switching between the plugged-in Jabra, which is Bluetooth, but it has a dongle, and trying to rapid switch from there, even though the headset was off, to my AirPods, and it couldn't do it. I had to manually go in and say, "Stop broadcasting on this one. It's off. Yes, it's plugged in wirelessly, but the dongle is plugged in." But I don't care about the device. I want my AirPods, which are the active device now, to be automatically just magically working. So I definitely feel that and understand how complicated and difficult that can be. So I'm happy to hear that they're working towards that.
Yeah, I think that's something that we'll see in the very near future. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really looking forward to that, and that'll definitely expand what is already a pretty broad offering of devices and peripherals overall.
Mm-hmm.
That are certified across those different Google platforms.
All right, so we've got the headsets, we've got the Chromebooks, which we talked about. Now, bring it all together, and let's talk about the docks. And then over on the HP side of things, the cameras. What are the options that we have over on those?
Yeah, so one of the things that's been really interesting, I think, as part of this acquisition is it really expands the footprint, and it expands the kinds of packaging that we can think about. Like, it's not just the camera. And when you went into, when Polly would go into a space before, it's like, all right, here's your camera, and then, have fun with the rest of your stuff. That we just do this piece. And so now I can look at this and say, I recommend the entirety of this package. And that might be a Poly or HP camera, which, by the way, so we've got the HP 320 camera. There's a 430 camera. We have the 620 camera. And I think coming very soon will be the HP 960 camera. These are all cameras that fit just, different spaces, different personas, different kinds of levels of workers. And so those are fantastic additions. And they pair really nicely with the Poly devices that are certified for Works with Chromebook. So that's our Studio P5, our Studio P15, which I'm on right now. And then we have our Studio R30, which is our smaller huddle space or personal camera. It can be used either way. I've used it as both. It's a very similar form factor to our Studio P15, but it has a wider angle lens. So if you're in a smaller space, but you need to capture a couple people on either side of a table, you can. Which reminds me that we have a really interesting package that we've been working on putting together. You mentioned docks before, so we have our HP makes their Essentials dock G5. It's one model, and then they have a Thunderbolt dock called the G4. Both of these are Works with Chromebook certified. One of the really cool things about these docks is that they make a really compelling and easy huddle space and bring your own device space setup, because you can take one of these docks like the G5, use it across any platform that you're on. I prefer ChromeOS, of course. Have the dock itself set in the middle of the table. You've got your display plugged into that. You've got your Studio R30 plugged into the dock as well. And then there's just a single USB-C cable that's always connected to the G5 dock. You just plug it in. It just works. And so all you've done is you go to whatever hoteling space, whatever room you've got, plug in this single cable, and that's it. From a ChromeOS perspective, it's all guaranteed to work. And so I think that's incredibly compelling to know that you're going to walk into a space and you're not going to think about messing around with all the different controls, or is this going to work, or do I have to use this room and not this room because they're different? It's just universally, you plug it in, it works. And from a ChromeOS perspective, that's super exciting. And that's part of the reason why Google goes to the trouble of going through these certifications, right? Is just to say, yes, we don't want your users to think about this. We don't want your administrators to have to spend all that time with the users thinking about this. Just go in and do it. And so we do.
Amazing. Yeah, some of the rooms that I've seen some of my clients set up are suffering from those problems. So I may start recommending the dock approach to them. They have some anchor docks in there, but the challenge that they're trying to do is generally they want to have it. They want the best of both worlds. So they want to say, hey, bring in your laptop, plug it in anywhere, it'll work. Also, if you don't have a laptop, sit down at any desk. There's a Chromebox attached to it, and unfortunately, people don't really connect or get the connection that they have to unplug from the Chromebox in order to plug into their laptop in order to have
Interesting.
everything light up there and have it juggle all of those devices. And yeah, there are issues with the camera sometimes doesn't connect, or the wired headset that's there doesn't connect, or things along those lines. So definitely something to think about is, okay, well, sure, it'll work really well if you just plug in the one cable to your device, but you also have to remember that it may be plugged into other things that are there, and then things get a little messed up.
Yeah, that could be a challenge, right? Because teaching people to mode switch is difficult. You're asking them to do something that isn't specifically for them, and that's always going to be a challenge, right? No matter what,
Mm-hmm.
is trying to think ahead to the next thing. Um, which obviously that's one of the beauties of Chrome OS, though. They've got a Chromebox already in the room. You just log in as you, all your stuff's there,
Yep.
so you already have the best of both worlds.
Exactly. Um, all right. So on the Chrome OS side of things, there's some things that we had talked about before the show that I actually didn't know were coming. So I'd like to bring those up here. Keep Alive is something that we talked about, and it is new in Chrome 119. However, I have been hearing that 119 has been rolled back. So that's not currently rolling out, but it is likely going to be coming soon. Depending when we release this episode, it may already be out. Why don't you tell us what Keep Alive is?
Yeah, so Keep Alive is a feature that is exists in specifically in Google Workspace. So it's not a general consumer Chrome feature right now. And by that I mean if you're using Gmail to log into something like that, this Keep Alive feature isn't there yet. But what Keep Alive is there to do is to say, as an administrator, I know that there's applications that I always want to run for whatever reason. I want them to launch automatically. And once they do, I want them to run in the background, and I don't want people to be able to um, stop that application from running. And I could think of a variety of places where you'd want something like this. Maybe there's, a custom kind of status indicator that says, yes, this employee is actually on their, device and logged in. You want to be able to see that. From our perspective, we have an application called PolyLens. I mentioned before that PolyLens is a management portal for all of your devices in your fleet. But PolyLens is also a desktop application. Um, and until recently, you were only able to see that on Windows and Mac OS. But this year at Google Next, actually, we launched PolyLens for web. And what that does is it gives you the ability to manage your devices that are plugged into your Chromebook or Chromebox and change all their settings, things that you expect to see from a desktop management app. You can actually get into our cameras, into our headsets, and if you want to change some of the parameters, like maximum volume level, for example, if you're on a call center and you don't want it to be too loud, you can actually limit either from a policy perspective or let your individual users do things like limit how loud a headset gets, so that if somebody starts, talking very loudly or you're yelling in the background, you won't pick any of that up, and it won't hurt your ears and cause fatigue, which is a really big deal in the call center world. And so PolyLens, one of these features that we want to be able to do is say, I want Lens to be able to run in the background so that if users are making changes, or if I, as an organization, want to push policies to these devices and basically always be managing my devices that are connected to Chromebooks and Chromeboxes, then I can do that. And so then I can say, here's a policy that's legally required in some nations. There might be, I mentioned again, this, volume limitation. There are legal requirements in some places around things like that. So I have to be able to guarantee that I can provide an experience that that matches what's expected in that environment. And it looks at across the different settings on our devices, and it's pretty straightforward. But it is also the only one of its kind. So this is a progressive web app, and so you can run it in the Chrome browser on any platform that you want to. But we built it specifically with ChromeOS in mind, with the idea that ChromeOS is as important a platform as Windows, Mac OS. This is equal footing from a Poly HP perspective, and so it's part of our drive to prove that,
Here,
and
here.
to provide exactly the same tools across all users. And so that's why it exists. And so this keep alive thing is incredibly important for us, because it really helps us push much harder into industries like call centers, where we really work hard to help our customers curate the experience for their agents.
Awesome. I love PWAs. I love, all of the work that's being done for those. Speaking of PWAs, one of the other things that we talked about here is Web HID is coming to Chrome and is going to work with Meet. Can you give us a little overview of that?
Yeah, so WebHID or WebHID basically is a technology that's existed for a long time. Google has a specification for this. And what it does is there's a similar technology, just called, USB HID or just HID, but this is device control. So this is something that says, I have a headset, it's got a mute button. When I press mute, I expect the application that I'm using to be aware that I hit mute. Um, and so this has existed in Google Meet for a little while. You can see it if you go in, they have a three-dot menu, and you can go in through there and say, I want to control my device, or allow this USB device to control the Google Meet experience. Google Meet's a starting point. But what about the, dozens of other applications in the world that also use your headsets and your cameras for whatever reason? I still want to be able to have those controls work. So what Google has been working fervently to do is encourage their ISV partners, part of the Chrome Enterprise Recommended program, which are basically software providers that create PWAs or web-based experiences for their applications. And these are many of these are call center applications. They might be screen recording applications. Any number of different applications where you're going to be using a headset. You may or may not use a camera. What this does is it allows the application to be aware that you're doing things like going on mute, going on hold. There's a pause button, changing volume, things like that, and that you can action one of those things through the application or through the headset itself. And they're both aware of each other. So you're not muted here, but not muted there, and you get confused. It's like, am I muted? Am I not muted? So, because that's one of the things that has really been the bane of some of our communication styles is you might hit mute on your headset, but your application doesn't see it. So you're just sitting there talking and nobody can hear you and you don't know why. And vice versa. You muted with your keyboard, but then you just want to hit that on your controller and then nothing happens. And everybody's telling you in the meeting, hey, you're still muted. And you're like, well, I just hit the button. I don't understand. Oh, now I'm double muted. So then it's super confusing. This eliminates all of that. And it's a software feature. And so we're really excited to see this grow in the market because it really just enhances the power of what we're building already.
That's fantastic. I've definitely had that problem. I got the Logitech keyboard here, the MX keys, and it has a microphone mute button on there. And I used it once, and it didn't actually mute. And I was like, well, then that's a wasted key. And it got to the point where I had that problem with those devices being able to say, hey, this is muted, not muted, etc. I just ended up relying on the movable boom arm, which mutes it on device, and I know that it's muted, and I still do the blowing into the microphone to see if I'm actually muted test.
It's stressful, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's stressful not being 100% sure that you're muted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the deal. That's a trust issue. Like, I feel like that's a really fundamental thing is you have to be able to trust that if you've got a colleague over here and you want to yell something at them really quick, that you're not yelling at your meeting and vice versa. You've got a really important point that you're making, and nobody heard you, and there was never an indication that you were muted, and that's just incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, we're super excited about this because I think it just improves trust.
Yeah.
And that's the deal.
That's a very super important part of all of this, especially if you're like many people I know that I don't do this, of course, mute their headsets and take a quick bio break while they're on a super long meeting and nobody knows. You just turn your camera off for a second and you were right back. And then all of a sudden, everybody hears something that they shouldn't. Hopefully, you trust that that's not the case and nobody can actually hear. So this has really been illuminating, definite interesting look into the Meet certified, ChromeOS certified and voice certified programs. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you to maybe test out some things or ask some questions or follow up, what's a good way that they can reach out?
So obviously, any HP sales rep is now a Poly sales rep. So that helps quite a bit. But we don't sell products directly. So you would look at our products through any of the normal channels that you buy them through, and you would start there. And that might be any of your popular resellers. So, CDW, AVI, SPL, SHI, you name it, right? These are all large resellers that sell Poly equipment. So that's one start. Obviously, we have a whole fleet of sales engineers that are there to help answer technical questions from our users or potential users to help, ease people into learning more about our products and also more about, now we consider the Google ecosystem to be pretty new. And so they're all learning too, just how powerful of an offering that we have. So that's probably the easiest thing for now is HP is everywhere, Poly is everywhere. Now we're kind of double everywhere. I guess that's the best way to put it.
All right, folks, if you have questions and comments, drop them in the comment section down below. If you have questions for Mike and haven't been able to find an answer anywhere, hit the comment section down below as well, and I can certainly pass them on and see if we can get an answer. Thank you, Mike, for coming on the show. This has been illuminating, and we'll have to get some Poly devices, play around with them, and have you back in the future.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.